Just like a good waiter, I wait until Nick stuffs his face before we go live. But we are live on YouTube on the Falcons Podcast. And I'm going to bring in Atlanta Falcons on SI on Facebook and Scott Kennedy Sports on Facebook. And we will get going. And as they get launching, we're just about ready to go. And welcome in, everybody. This is the Wednesday edition of the Falcons Podcast. That means this is the last time you'll see us before the New Orleans Saints game. It's hate week, as we like to say down here in the South. And what says New Orleans Saints better than a hurricane blowing through the state of Georgia over the course of the next 72 hours or so? So everybody be safe as it comes through. We'll probably lose a tree or two, but hopefully no big damage, flooding, etc. Be safe out there, y'all. This is the Falcons Podcast. We go live on Mondays and Wednesdays, and my name is Scott Kennedy. I'm in Atlanta. This guy over here, Nick Kendall, gets up bright and early with us. He's in Seattle. Nick, how are you doing this morning?
I am doing pretty well. Unfortunately, the wife has a cold now, so I'm having to take care of her and everything before coming down here. So you saw me stuff my face with an egg real quickly, trying to, eat heavy on that protein side of thing. And my coffee's way too hot because I just poured it. So this is coming at you raw right now. This is
me too. I haven't even had a sip yet. I was writing something up. There was a transaction breaking, so apologies for being a couple minutes late, but trying to make some money on that side of things too, Nick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But overall, doing pretty good. Can't complain too much. Winter is coming out here to hopefully get outside a little bit more. If between the raindrops, because once it's cold and wet out here, a lot of the areas that I like to go in the Alpine are inaccessible. And I'm not much of a winter sports guy, so hopefully getting out there before the end of the year.
The last big hurricane, remember, y'all might remember this here too, in Atlanta and Georgia, y'all, was it was a few years. It was probably 7 years ago or so already. The one that washed everybody out of Florida. Everybody left this time, and they were trying to get out. And it was so hot all the way up until that week, and it was like the first week of October. And the hurricane came in and whoosh, and it was 50 degrees behind it. It's like, okay, that's kind of what we need now, because it was hot yesterday. We need a hurricane to blow summer's ass right on out of here, and we'll get right into fall. We want to hop into the chat. One of the reasons why we do this live is we like having a conversation with y'all. So we certainly appreciate your help with the chat, with the likes, the shares, all of that type of thing has been good. I think we've probably doubled in size this year on this podcast. And a lot of that is because of the work that y'all help us with by liking and telling a friend and all that type of stuff. So thank you very much. Evan J was in here first. He says, morning, fellas. It's Aints week. Let's get right this week. It's brutal that we lost Dahlman to the IR. If I had to pick one to keep, it would have been him. Lindstrom. But of the two is probably what you mean on that. And I said that on Monday. I think Dahlman is probably, at least in the short term, was a bigger loss against the Kansas City Chiefs for sure. And some of that may just have to do with timing, Nick. The center quarterback exchange was off. I think there were 2 fumbles right away. Everything looked discombobulated, but with a week of practice, maybe that levels out just a little bit. And the Falcons brought in a couple of familiar faces. Matt Hennessy is back, and Eli Wilkinson, who played really well at the left guard position. He was a converted tackle. I think he played tackle out with the Denver Broncos and played a good guard spot for the Falcons in 2022, I believe it was.
I think you're right.
May have been 2021, 2022, but he played a good spot and then got injured a little bit towards the end of the season. But 2 new guys coming in, adding some depth. So hopefully, Evan, a little time will help with Ryan Newsel and Kirk Cousins becoming more acclimated with one another, and we won't see it quite as discombobulated was the word I use, Nick.
Yeah, my biggest concern is the run blocking up front with them, and that takes the coordination of the 5 guys going the same way, especially with as much zone as we've seen the Falcons trying to run with this McVay tree with Robinson here. And I don't think you can just automatically get that chemistry back. So that's something that we'll see. I mean, the Saints, I don't think they are the absolute juggernaut defensive line that we've seen, when they were at their peak. But it's honestly been more the offensive side of the things. But, they still got a first-round pick, Brian Brisset. Chase Young is on there. Brian Brisset. Isn't that how you pronounce his name?
You said something else.
Brian Brisset.
No, you said first round pick, but you put an extra R in there somewhere. But that's okay. I think Freud says there's no accident, so you still might be right.
Yeah, Brian Brisset.
Or maybe I'm hearing things funny.
It could be my internet too. I don't know what I said, but He's been a pleasant surprise. I know that at Clemson, he had his last season there. He kind of struggled compared to expectation, but he was dealing with the death of a sibling. So that was kind of, hard to focus on football when you have that stuff going on. They still have Cam Jordan, of course, as well. But really, it's the Saints offense that is the one to watch. Can they slow down the wide receivers? Gosh, how great has Chris Olave been? You see all those graphics of like separation and everything. And Chris Olave has been one of the best separators in the NFL so far. And Rashid Shaheed has been one of the best deep threats in all of football as well. Now, the Eagles slowed him down. Maybe you can take something from that Vic Fangio game, but it's the offense right now with the Saints. That small sample size, those first two games looked like the best in the NFL. We'll see if that continues.
Yeah, you look at the box score on this, and you from that Eagles game, you're like, how was that even close? I mean, the Eagles dominated that game in the stat column. There's only a 1 turnover difference. Now, granted, one of those came in the end zone, but it was almost 2-1 in yardage. It was like 420 to like 220. And for those of you who, we got a lot of Georgia Bulldogs fans in here that are still kind of mad that Jalen Carter is in Philadelphia. If you are one of those that's mad that Jalen Carter is in Philadelphia instead of with the Atlanta Falcons, don't watch last week's game. My God.
Yeah, he was unbelievable.
Nick, we said Monday, like it's really hard to trust PFF right now because their grades are just so out of whack. Okay, this guy was a beast and he's ranked like a 50. So I'm watching the first quarter and the first half of this game last week. Jalen Carter is having like the best half that any defensive tackle could possibly have. I mean, so I'm like, all right, PFF, come on. You cannot screw this up. We cannot put an extra F in effing this up with PFF. Yeah, he was graded like a 93. I'm like, okay, thank you. Somebody's watching the game at least with the Saints and with the Saints. Yeah, he was good. It makes me think, who's going to be in that spot? Pretty good defensive lineman for the Atlanta Falcons as well. And if they don't figure out how to block the inside of David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett and friends better than they blocked Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, they're in trouble. They're in trouble.
And it's pretty surprising because, that offensive line, Scott, four out of 5 are first-round picks. Now, granted, just because you use the investment doesn't mean you're going to get the return on it. That's something I have a hard time in the Broncos country. They have to take a tackle. Well, if there's not one there worth taking, you can't reach. It's not just a generic guy there. But, you have Ruiz first round. I believe at least Ruiz a first-round pick. Excuse me, McCoy was a second-round pick, but early second. I loved him coming out of Texas A&M. Penning, who's been erratic. You get Falcons country fans want to watch for Penning this week. He is a cheap shot king. So want to be careful about him. He is problematic in that way, unfortunately. It's like a wrestling bit at this point. He's the heel. But then also Talise Fuaga. I'm surprised their offensive line struggled as badly as they did, other than Jalen Carter is an all-world talent that would have gone top 3 if it wasn't for the number of off-field questions.
Yeah, and apologies to who's the guy I bag on all the time that was at ESPN, Todd McShay. Apologies to Todd McShay for the world coming down on him for saying he had character concerns. Todd was right, finally. And they've got a little problems on their offensive line, too. Their starting center, Eric McCoy, is out. That is going to be a problem for them, too, because the Eagles absolutely killed them inside. And that's something to keep an eye on also. Something we like to keep an eye on is the sunrise coming in here with us. Michael Ronquillo says, good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast. Right back at you. John Harrell's here. He says a little bit later, he says, good morning. He says he's not racing. So he drags his Mustang, and the weather's going to knock him out. The weather's knocking a lot of stuff out. They moved the high school football games to tonight instead of Friday. I'm actually supposed to go to a concert, going to see Seven Dust. Any of y'all been down to the Eastern? I haven't been down to the Eastern yet. Supposed to go down to the Eastern to see Seven Dust with my son tonight. I'm like, hey, Sean, you want to go see Seven Dust? He's like, yeah. So we're going to see Seven Dust tonight. John asks, he says, what's the update on McGarry? It was listed day-to-day an MCL sprain, which is kind of what I was hoping it would be with an MCL. One of the reasons Nick, I seem to be able to diagnose a lot of these things. One of the reasons is because I've hurt just about everything in my life. I've got over a dozen broken bones. I've sprained both knees. I've had MRIs, et cetera, et cetera. And then, being around sports and covering it, and my friends playing soccer with multiple ACL injuries, all that type of stuff. But an MCL, when it happens, it hurts like a mother. I did mine. I was like 30-something years old. And I'm like, we were just leaving I'd gone skiing with my wife. And I'm like, all right, let's do this jump. It's the last thing we're going to do. And I landed and my knees buckled. And, oh, God, that hurt. It was a sprain, MCL, about 3 weeks. Luckily, I'm not Caleb McGarry. Caleb McGarry is a lot bigger and stronger and tougher. But that's good news. And he was listed day to day. Raheem Morris speaks today at 11:30. Probably give us an update. I would expect him to say, we've got him day to day, and we will see. I'd be prepared to see Storm Thornton.
Yeah, and I'm much less worried about Storm Thornton, but I still am worried because quietly, I guess maybe not quietly, I love this guy coming out of the draft. I think there was another talking about more and more off-field incidents, but Carl Granderson has been on a tear this season. I remember watching him at Wyoming. Heck of a player. I feel like he was involved in a weird incident with a hotel room. I don't know. That's not good. But yeah, one of the teammate of his. But anyway, Carl Granderson's been playing awesome football. One of the highest rated edge rushers through 3 weeks. Fell to day 3, but again, I think there was other things going on there. Has like a good build for an edge rusher as well. So if you have issues with Storm Norton out there, I'd be somewhat worried with Carl Granderson because he's talented enough that he can make a game-changing play there at the edge rusher spot, and he's been really good through the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, when you mentioned a couple of their defensive linemen, and y'all, when you're watching, this is why I interrupt Nick a lot, because when I don't, I forget. It's like Carl Granderson's been the guy in their front. That he's been really, really good. He's been their best player, and right now, the Saints can't really get pressure outside of Granderson with their front four. That sound familiar? They're pretty good against the run. They're still pretty stout up front, but Cam Jordan's been kind of relegated to a backup role and almost moved inside, which isn't surprising because strength stays around a lot longer than twitch. So you can move guys inside. You can move guys from corner to safety. You can move guys from outside to inside. If they're still, if they've got the size to
size increases with age sometimes.
And Cam Jordan's a big dude. I mean, he's a big dude. He can play defensive tackle. So one of those things, Robot of Doom, good to see you, Robot of Doom on YouTube. He's usually a Twitch guy, but I don't do Twitch. He says, morning, gents. Hope y'all are having a great week. Good so far. I'm hoping I don't have to fish a pine tree out of my pool. I don't mind the driveway so much, but God, it's a pain in the ass to get them out of the pool. Rusty has a great comment here. Rusty, I agree with you 100%. He says it's fair to say we are at the point of the season where close losses and moral victory should no longer be acceptable. With mistakes, not acceptable. You're not going to go undefeated. But with New Orleans and Tampa Bay coming up, and then the Panthers, Raheem and Kirk were brought in. It's time to start winning. I agree. I think you have to go at least 2-1 in these next 3. Even if you're favored in all 3 of them, the probability of you winning 3 in a row when you've got a 60% chance of winning is something like 18%. So it's still improbable. You got to go 2-1 out of this at least, and go 3-3 out of the first 6 games, 17 games, third of your schedule. First third of your schedule. If you're 3-3, you're in pretty good shape. You're kind of where you want to be. The breaking in period, the Chiefs on the road against the Eagles, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody's overly surprised that the team is 1-2 at this point.
Yeah.
No matter what you predicted the record, Nick.
Yeah, 1-2 is not shocking. You also have one of the toughest schedules so far with Denver, with your opponents being 8-1. So 1-2 is where you wanted to be. You've kept afloat. Now, it's not where you wanted to be, but it's where you had to be worst case scenario. So you kept afloat. Now you have to win, as you mentioned, 2 of these next 3. Although it's still a long season, you could still, drop 2 of the 3 and still have your head afloat. But then you have to go on a tear, and it gets harder and harder from there. So huge games coming up, especially you talk about it, divisional opponents. These are the 2 who it's going to come down to at the ends, and you only get to play them twice. So having that, head-to-head matters so much in multiple ways. So it's time. The season starts.
Yeah, it is. And there's no more, going into the Philadelphia Eagles game on the road after that bizarre week 1, I had said, okay, if you go up there and you lose, but you see some direction, you see where things are going, that's okay. That's a win for me. And then you got the win. That was just gravy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was thinking in the fourth quarter when it looked like the Falcons were going to lose that game. I'm like, I'm still encouraged by this game. That's kind of how I felt against Kansas City Chiefs. Okay. I'm encouraged by this game. You lost the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay. I'm encouraged. Now, let's get some of the mistakes out of the way. Some of the stuff, so you made a really big course correction after the Steelers. Yeah. You've been stuffed on 4th and 1 short with Bijan Robinson twice in a row in 2 different games. Let's figure something else out. Growing pains are acceptable. Again, not going undefeated. Nobody's going undefeated this year, I think. Certainly not the Falcons. You're not going to win the next 14 in a row, but you can win 10. You could win 10 of these. The 10-4 is not completely out of the question if you play the way you're capable of playing, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing now is you're starting to get the injuries on the offensive line with a quarterback who's pretty immobile and a team that is struggling with blocking up front in the run game, where that should be your calling card, especially as you're trying to work out a new offense with a new quarterback. So things can change here. Obviously, injuries change perspective a lot. The one thing that it still remains to be seen just how good this Falcons defense is, I believe, up front. I mean, you have Judon doing it, but after that, who else is really impacting the pass rusher consistently? Grady Jarrett can, but I don't feel like he's been overly flashy so far this season through 3 games. And honestly, the Chiefs have been a little bit wonky on offense. They still have Patrick Mahomes. They had I think they had the highest success rate of any team in football this season, but they're not explosive. They're pretty happy just kind of dinking and dunking right now. But maybe that's just how teams are playing the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. But I digress. We're going to find out these next 2 games, especially. Now, granted, Tampa Bay and the Saints were looking awesome offensively until this week. So, again, the sample size matters. But just how good is this Falcons defense overall? Are they going to finish top 15 like we've talked about? Or is this something where, the linebackers start to you have questions there? You have questions about the true winners at pass rush, your second cornerback spot. They really need to step up, and now that the offense is starting to have injuries mount up on the offensive line.
Yes, in virtually every metric, they will finish top 15. Yes, that's my prediction. Now, in every one, they were still bottom 10 in pass rush win rate. Okay, that's a component of the cake. At the end of the day, I'm still going to have a birthday cake, and the birthday cake is going to be a top 15 defense in most metrics, from EPA, all of those type of things, to points and yards. I believe it'll be top 15 at the end. And again, I think part of the reason, Nick, that they've had a little bit of trouble running the ball, relatively speaking, I mean, remember, they put about 160 up on Philadelphia, and they ran pretty much at will against a 9-man front against the Steelers. They didn't run it as well against Kansas City, and Kansas City said, all right, beat us deep. And they did. They showed that. They took some shots, and they moved the ball over the top. They got one of Kyle Pitts. Ray McLeod was open. Mooney got some chances. I'm not sure I like seeing him on that swing pass, though. I think he's just not quite tough enough to break a tackle out there on the edge against a safety in a corner that are man blocked. He's not going through traffic out there. And I know the idea is to try and get him in space, but there's been traffic out there, and he's not a traffic guy, Nick. Darnell Mooney's an open field guy.
Yeah. I still think it's nice, though, to maybe get a little bit, show that a couple times, because then you have the ability to play off of that as well. So not every single play. I mean, obviously every single play you're trying to score. And go. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Just if you show it enough and then you pull it out at the right moment, you're setting things up down the line as well. So as far as the Falcons defense so far this season, EPA and whatnot, just, pulling it up, just be curious. And granted, again, 3-game sample size, that is minuscule, and it's dependent a lot on who you've played so far. Like stuff like DVOA doesn't even really take effect until week 6 or week 8, because we don't know how weighted we need things to be based on your opponent. But the Falcons are 20th in EPA per play, 24th in success rate. They are 19th in dropback EPA per play, and 21st in rush EPA per play. So again, Chiefs, Eagles, you should have pretty good overall, at least EPA from that Steelers game where you only gave up 18 points and no touchdowns. But
I think let them inside the 30 until the fourth quarter. I mean, yeah, they strangled the Steelers.
Yeah. I do think that might also be a testament to where defense is at across the league right now, with points being so low that, being siloed, not that you are, but just like the fan perspective of just watching their team is like, oh, the defense is playing good. Well, almost everybody's defense is playing good, unless your name is the Cowboys or the Commanders. But other than that, Bengals also been dreadful. But we got Dave coming in and says, how soon can Rook and Dorless be out of witness protection? Honestly, at this point, I think the Falcons' defensive line on the interior has been good enough that if you see them, it means probably something went wrong with injury up front or the season has gone off the rails. So I don't have issues with the Falcons' interior defensive line right now. I think if Rook or Dorless are playing, it spells something bad right now.
Yeah, I mean, the guys they've got in, Contavious Street, Eddie Goldman, Taquan Graham, those guys have been playing well. And, again, I mentioned this because I had someone in the comments saying, well, Raheem said it flat out. Why are you even questioning it? The guys ahead of them are better. Because that's not the point. The point is, if you were drafting these guys into the depth, don't you think those picks could have been better used elsewhere? Now, we're going to have a story on Falcons SI. It's going to be published about noon about the Falcons need to get more out of their draft class. And, as we were discussing it, I'm like, here, I changed more to anything out of their draft class. There, I fixed it for you. Something, anything. It's like a self-imposed probation. Can you imagine if you'd gone into the season and say, you're not allowed to use any of your draft picks? Can you imagine telling a team that? And you'd be like, that's like the death penalty. Now you're redshirting some guys. That happens every year, but you count on some of these guys to make an impact somewhere, especially if I'm going to use a second and a third on one guy. If you felt so good about defensive line, and again, I know I've said this, I'm talking in circles, because I said the day after the draft, the only way this makes sense is if you forget win now. If you just throw win now completely out the window, this draft makes sense. I got my quarterback for 2026, and I got my defensive line for 2026. That's not helping us in this conversation today. That's not going to help us against the Saints this weekend. And that's kind of the balance there of what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to win now, or are we trying to build for 2026? Because you're kind of half pregnant on both of those, Nick.
Yeah, and just looking at the snaps of the last game for the Falcons, have I taken Taquan Graham off the field? No. He's been he was probably your best interior defensive lineman in that last game. David Onyemata, no, I'm not taking him off the field. Of course, Grady Jarrett, no. Neither of those guys is a nose tackle like Eddie Goldman. Maybe there's snaps to be had with – also, I'm probably not taking off Zach Harrison,
It's Contavious Street or Goldman.
It would be Contavious Street, who really good athlete coming out of NC State. I think had an injury his last year there. But maybe Contavious Street would be on the outside looking in if you do really want to get Dorless / Arohoro on the field.
Morning, Steve. That's Dad. Hey, Dad, how you doing? Good to see you. 10 Cam says thoughts on Falcons going to a dual running back and Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. I don't remember Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman really ever blocking for one another. As you're talking about this is, running up basically the old fashioned pro set where you'd have two tailbacks split behind Nick. Where'd you go?
I'm here.
Your
my camera got unplugged.
You'd have two tailbacks split. That's a good old fashioned pro set. And I don't remember seeing those guys on the field together like that. And I certainly don't remember either one of them blocking a whole lot for one another. And, we can talk about Devontae Freeman. When it triggers some Falcons fans, let's talk about Devontae Freeman blocking, period. Now, Bijan Robinson has looked pretty good in pass protection on this one. Roy, good to see you. He says, good morning, Scott, Nick. I think the Falcons can get on track. Too much talent not to. Yeah, I think they're on track. Now, we'll see. You go 1-3. They need to be at least 3-3 after 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. After these 3 weeks coming up, they need to go 2-1. They've got the Saints and they've got the Buccaneers at home, and they go on road to the Panthers. 3-0 would be nice. It's not out of the question. They'll probably be favored in all 3 games, unless they get blown out by the Saints. Right now, they're favored in all 3 games. Not out of the question. Appreciate you. And John says, has Harrison been on the field yet? Zach, I thought Zach's played a decent amount. Maybe I'm missing that, but I think I have. I'm pretty sure we've seen them a good bit.
He had 14 snaps last week.
Yeah.
So he's rotational, but I mean, it's not shocking. He had 10 snaps week 2 and week 1. he had 16 snaps. So he's second string, but he's getting out of there.
Another question in here. Nando, good to see, says Rich Rising on to Baghead Week, fellas. Baghead, yeah, the old Saints. That's the Who Dat. That's I was on a Saints podcast, yesterday, and it's funny. They're trying to talk a little trash, and I'm like, one, it's hard to talk someone that grew up a Falcons fan trash to them, because no one's going to hurt you more than your own team has already hurt you. It's like being in an abusive relationship. It's like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. This team has broken my heart time and time again. But yeah, I did mention the fact that even though no matter how bad the Falcons were when I was watching them in the 80s, you could always count on beating the Saints. Things have changed a little bit on that, though. It's tilted back. It's tilted back towards the Saints over the last 20 years. I won't say they've had their number, but they're probably plus 10 in those 40 games at least on that one. Let me see here. Was Keith came in with some questions. He said, the question, do Falcons compare closer to the Panthers or Cowboys, who gave up more than 40 to the Saints, or the Eagles, who only gave up 12? They're defensively, I think they're much closer to doing what the Eagles did, which is hold them under 300 yards and under 20 points, than giving up 40 plus. Now, strange things happen. Could be an 80-point game. But I think we all kind of think this weekend coming in, it should be under 40 based on the injuries and the defenses and figuring things out. The over-under on this should be under 40. Not just one team. I mean, the whole thing, like a 20-17 type of game. 21-17. I predicted 20-13, spoiler alert, yesterday. So I think it'll be a kind of a low-scoring game. I believe in this Falcons defense.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how the Saints attack the Falcons. I think the Saints have pretty underrated defensive back grouping out there. Marshawn Lattimore, obviously, he's at the point where he might start to slip some. Maybe not be a top 5 cornerback anymore, but he's still been extremely talented for a long time. They took a second-round pick in Kool-Aid McKinstry, who, from what I've seen, has been playing well this season out there opposite him. And they have a really fun slot cornerback, too, in Alontae Taylor, who I really loved him coming out of Tennessee. He was a fun player. And then Honey Badger as well at safety. So we'll be curious to see how these Falcons passing game matches up. I think they're going to have to use a lot of attention on Carl Granderson to slow him down. He's like the one guy that you can't let you beat you up front, because he can make that game-changing play. But curious to see how this passing weapons for the Falcons match up, because I think the Saints have a pretty darn good defensive back group and cornerback trio.
Terry says, at what point do they sit Lorenzo Carter? He plays a lot of snaps. He's played a lot over the last two years. Think he has less than 6 sacks over all those snaps. Yeah, he's a squad player, is how we refer to it in soccer. He's just a back end depth guy. He shouldn't really be a starter. And he's not, but he is. He's getting a lot of time over there, especially when they go to 2 edges. Now, this is probably the case where Braylon Trice may have seen some time. Maybe, who knows? But I think that's one of the reasons why they go heavy a lot with a 4 and then try and cover on the backside. I mean, I think I said during the Chiefs game, I'm like, even when they send 5, they're not getting any pressure. So you might as well send Judon and 2 other guys and try and get them with 3 and at least put an extra guy in coverage. Now, the Saints are a little bit like that too. The difference is when they blitz, they seem to be pretty damn effective at it. They'll bring 8 to the line and rush 5. They're where they disguise their packages, but they have to blitz. It's going to open up some things on the back end. It's going to be a high risk, high reward type of defense for the Saints. We'll see how the Falcons handle it with a couple of new starters.
At least it's not happening in game, right? That's kind of what happened to the Saints. They had some injuries in game and they had to go to the backup. So you get a week to kind of work on some things and build in some protections out there. Again, I keep coming back to it. They just need to be able to freaking run the ball. Just take a little bit of pressure off their offensive line. Let them go forward. Let them be the attacking players. And when you got Bijan Robinson, it shouldn't be this hard to run the football. Now, granted, 2 of the better defensive fronts the last 2 weeks on paper with the Eagles and the Probably three of the better defensive fronts because the Steelers are number one right now. So maybe that's just part of the schedule. Maybe that'll soften up a little bit this week, and we'll see what's going on with the injuries of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the next week. But got to figure out how to run the football. Get yourself in better positions. You're not in a winning situation when it's 3rd and long with Kirk Cousins. It's just he doesn't have the ability to extend plays. You got to stay on time with Kirk.
Trevor Simpson says, how bad would our pass rushing be without Matt Judon? Pretty bad. Judon has done well. He was a really, really good pickup. Dallas Turner would have really helped. Dallas Turner's not playing much either, but you know who had the big splash play this weekend was the first guy off the board was Leatu Latu. Had a strip sack fumble that helped win the game for the Colts and got them off the schneid. But, look at Dallas Turner. He didn't even play in week 3. I don't know if he was inactive or whatnot, but I don't see a grade for him on PFF. And he's only taken, 50 total snaps in the first 3 weeks of the season. So Dallas Turner's off to a little bit of a slow start as well. I don't know that he would have made the impact that we all hoped he would have if he had been taken. Now, those wide receivers, though, Nick, the wide receivers are definitely showing up as well. Adunze, I think, battled a little bit of an injury. He's got a rookie quarterback, but God, Malik Neighbors looks like a monster. Jesus. And the kid out in Arizona is legit.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, Brian Thomas looks awesome too. They've been explosive play. I mean, Jacksonville, how are we on, God, I can't think of the Peterson Firewatch right now. I mean, that's too much talent on that team, I think, to be.
With Jacksonville, what are they? Are they 1-2 or are they 0-3?
I think they're 1-2, but they might be 0-3. I don't know. They've been a major disappointment. They lost to Cleveland. They might be 0-3. But regardless, they are definitely on concern watch. They're 0-3 right now. Tankathon has them with the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming draft because they also have the worst strength of schedule. So yeah, AFC South. Everybody talking crap, including me, about the NFC South coming into this year, but it looks like it's the AFC South that's going to be the horrific division here this season. Even the Texans look a little disconjointed at times. They looked horrible last week.
In 2 games, Dallas Turner has a sack and 2 hurries. And I haven't watched the Vikings yet to know, how did he do? I'm just looking at numbers. And again, if he's hurt, he wouldn't be doing us much good in Atlanta either, would he?
No.
And honestly, the guy to watch here, Nick, that just scares the bejesus out of me has been, Falcons killer for a while now, is who Keith brings up, is Alvin Kamara. Mm-hmm. I think you can put a little bit of a bottle on Olave, help to limit him, but it's the underneath stuff that has been killing the Falcons. Now, you shouldn't have to worry about that as much with Derek Carr. The scrambling. Mahomes can scramble for first downs. He doesn't want to, but he's sneaky fast. Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields are just good runners, period. Mm-hmm. But what if the quarterback's rush for the Falcons, positive yards? It has to be over 200 yards in the first 3 games.
Yeah, and I'm also just coming to this point about the rushing attack. I mean, Kamara, they got to slow him down. This will be your first game against a mediocre to poor scrambler / athlete. I mean, Mahomes is not a great athlete, but he's such an effective scrambler because of the space they have. So he's like twitched up. It's like he runs awkwardly. It doesn't look, like Justin Fields or Jalen Hurts.
He covers a lot of ground in a hurry when he decides to take off and run.
Yeah, he does. He's one of the hardest to sack in the NFL. Him and Josh Allen, Josh Allen's been playing unbelievable football. But I'm curious to see how the defensive line looks now that you can maybe pin your ears back a little bit, not have to be as disciplined with your rush lanes because Fields and Hurts can kill you with their legs if you rush undisciplined. Where Carr's always been an underrated athlete, has had some injuries since then. He's okay, but it will be fun to follow. But yeah, Kamara's been awesome. They've really invested in that offensive line, run blocking wise. I know that offensive line will never win Rookie of the Year, but Talise Fuaga has been awesome out there as well. I mean, some of his movement blocks, his second level blocks, Scott, have been awesome so far this season. Some real highlight stuff from them as well. So I got to be able to stop the run in this one, hopefully without the threat of the run game. Also, there's a little bit of familiarity, I guess, also because this is going to be a team that's going to want to run a lot of zone. Obviously, it's Clint Kubiak out there. That is the offensive coordinator that everybody was loving the first 2 weeks, and last week Vic Fangio kind of, stepped on him. But you should see a lot of outside inside zone there. So maybe since you've been going up against it practicing, you have a little bit of ability to slow that down.
Was Fuaga at the Senior Bowl, or was he the one that was missed? Who was
Tyler
I thinking?
Guyton was at the Senior Bowl.
There. I thought he was there. I have to look it up. And I don't remember. There was one of those guys that was super highly ranked that I wasn't a huge fan of. And it may have been Fontenot.
Fuaga was there. He was the Oregon State
kid. I don't remember 100% for sure.
Fuaga was there. He was the Oregon State kid. He might have only done one practice.
Maybe that's what it was. I just didn't get to see enough of him when he was there. But yeah, we're starting to get a look at some of the rookies, and it's a good reminder. Other than these wide receivers, a lot of the guys are, well, most teams are getting more than the Falcons. All of them are, but it's still not how you're going to take the next step to a championship team. Typically,
and it's unfortunate too because like the one guy who had the easiest path to playing time got injured in preseason. Braylon, I mean, you need edge help, and Braylon Trice, he would have been in the rotation without a doubt. I mean, I was not a huge Braylon Trice fan just because I love super athletic testing edge rushers. We have enough data now that you can have guys who are mediocre athletes, but they're exceptions.
He's an edge setter.
Yeah. He's been effective with technique and stuff, and he also relentless pursuer, which there's always a role for you. What was he, a 3rd round pick? If you get a rotational 3rd round guy, that's fine. That is fine for the edge spot. There's always the Max Crosby's out there, right? The Danielle Hunters, but exceptions to the rule. And those guys were freak athletes as well. But yeah, that was the one guy who really was set up for a good role. The other ones all are behind a good bit of depth up front. So, I mean, if things change, it's a long season still. We're only 3 games in. There'll be opportunities still to be had, but he was the one who had the obvious pathway to playing time.
So we're just about to wrap it up and get out of here. Nick, give me some final thoughts and maybe possibly a prediction for what you think for this game coming up against the New Orleans Saints.
I think we're finally going to have a Bijan step-up game in this one, and I think they're going to really try to focus to get him the ball both in the run game and the pass game. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get 25 touches in this one. Yeah, that includes the receiving game as well. And I think they're probably going to try to punch in the middle a little bit. I think Demario Davis, he's been a good linebacker for the Saints, but he's getting a little bit older out there, and the interior defensive line isn't as talented as it has been in the past. So I think, again, protecting your offensive line, you need to get this run game going right now. It's never been easier to run the football, but we're reaching a point where with teams are playing so much too high safety shell stuff that you should be able to run the football. And it's harder to do with running a quarterback who's not a good rushing threat as well, threatening the edges, but I'm predicting a better run game here. Bijan step-up game. And we got Demario Davis out even as well, says Jordan Brown. So you should be able to abuse those linebackers somewhat. And I'm going to take the Falcons winning this one 23-20.
I like the field goals typically, and then the Falcons kind of eschewed field goals. So I was like, Younghoe Koo is good for at least 6 points. So I like to try and factor in 2 field goals to my score. So I went 20-13. As long as Ryan Newsel can be competent and Thornton can be competent. They don't have to be great, but as long as they can be competent. I really watched the Saints struggle with the Eagles front four. Now they put a lot of investment into the front four, but golly, they struggled with them. Between Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, Falcons handled those guys for the most part. The Saints didn't. My goodness. And the strength of this Falcons team is safety and right up the middle in the interior line. So if the Saints can't handle Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata, and the rotation in there, they're in big trouble. You never know what's going to happen in this game, but I do. Beginning of the season, I pick a split with the Bucs, I pick a split with the Saints, and I usually pick the home team. It's the Falcons' turn. They're at home. They're playing good football, coming off a loss where they feel like they should have won. I like them at home to win this game, and I got 20-13.
Yeah, and interesting, just looking at it here, Scott, the line opened 4.5 favoring the Falcons, and now it's down to 1.5 for the Falcons. So not sure where that line, why it's moved so dramatically, but worth watching for sure. Obviously there must be money coming on the Saints to have Vegas change it by 3. unless it's the offensive line stuff. But I can't imagine that changing it that much.
Rusty says, Scott, when was the last time we didn't have to sweat on Sunday and won a game by 14 or more? Let me see here. I can go by game logs, but it would take me a while. I don't know, man. Even when you're up 14, do you ever feel comfortable as an Atlanta Falcons fan? Have you ever felt like we got this in the bag and had it in the bag, just felt comfortable? I mean, 28-3, the first touchdown, I went, there's no way, right? I mean, that's just part of being a Falcons fan. Yeah. It's part of growing up and watching this team do those things. Like I said, one of my first impressions was 1980, the playoffs against the Dallas Cowboys. I think they had a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter. I was 7 years old. I've been scarred. So no.
You had it twice last
time
year.
You didn't have to sweat? Never.
Two times last year, you beat a team by 14 plus. They were both pretty bad teams. You beat the Colts week 16, 29-10. And then also you beat the Panthers opening week 24-10. But just in general, college football and NFL are different beasts. There's a reason the lines are completely different. The NFL is parity. I mean, the biggest spread in the NFL last week ended up being one of the biggest blowouts in the Broncos beating Tampa. The biggest underdog won by some of the most this last week. And they probably could have beat him by more. They put their foot on the throat and just took the air out of the ball the second half. The NFL is very tight margins overall. I mean, even the Chiefs, every single one of their games has been an absolute squeaker so far. They've won in the last zeros. Somebody said never comfortable until 0-0-0. That's been the Chiefs the last 3 weeks. They could easily be 0-3. So winning a game by 14 in the NFL, even if you're the best team in football, that's rare. This isn't Georgia versus Georgia Southern. I have no disrespect.
Well, my point is even if you're up 14, you never feel comfortable as an Atlanta Falcons fan. You just don't. And that was before 2016. That just epitomized it. You're like, you gotta be kidding. It's like that wasn't that game. It's like, oh, Tom Brady's the GOAT. I'm like, that wasn't Tom Brady. That was the Atlanta effing Falcons. Yes, we know. It was whoever was gonna, oh yeah, we'll move on from that.
And I didn't
now,
want to
taking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to the Super Bowl, that impressed me. Kind of like LeBron going up to Cleveland and taking them to their first ever championship. That impressed me.
Yeah.
Beating the Falcons in the Super Bowl, miss me.
Yeah, real quick, the best rookie edge rusher so far, Scott. We didn't talk about him. Talking about edges missing, but Jared Verse has been pretty darn good out there for the Rams so far. It's been more so on the run defensive side where he's been really good because he has like a bunch of stops for that defensive line. But he has 13 pressures, only 1 sack, but 13 pressures through 3 games, being probably the best edge setter in the class as well. He's been good.
What's interesting is that through 3 games, no rookie has more than a sack in the NFL. That's pretty. It's just a reminder out there that it's also hard to come in and
it was a terrible defensive class. Also, I mean, we didn't have the first one picked until pick 15, right? So that's never happened before. Never had one not go in the top 10 even. So that's
Latu, Dallas Turner. They each have a sack. Jared Verse has a sack. Andrew Phillips, a defensive back. Jonah Ellis, Javon Solomon, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and then Byron Murphy and Edgerrin Cooper each have half a sack. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 9 rookies in the entire NFL that drafted. There might be a couple undrafted rookies that have snuck in there somewhere. 9 rookies in the entire NFL that have put the quarterback on the ground in the first 3 games. So, yes, we'd like to see the rookies contribute more, but it's early. And again, this draft class was for 2026, which begs the question, are you in or out? It was kind of mixed signals, as I've said before. Yeah. So on that said, no mixed signals here. We're going to get out of here. I want to say thank you, Keith. Thank you for the stars over there on Facebook. We will be back on Monday, I believe. I don't think there's anything going on Monday that would keep us from coming to see you on Monday morning after the Falcons and Saints game on Sunday. Y'all stay safe over the next 48, 72 hours, please, in Georgia and Florida. I know we got some Florida fans and stuff down there. And as it makes its way up through Tennessee, et cetera, be safe and have a great rest of your week. We'll see you on Monday.
Go Dogs.